The desert stretched endlessly before me, a sea of shifting gold under the unforgiving sun. The horizon rippled with heat, and my car's air conditioner seemed to be losing the battle against the rising temperature. As a travel photographer, I'd been through some challenging environments, but this desert seemed to whisper something ancient, untouchable, a presence just out of reach. I was heading to the next shoot location, some forgotten ghost town, when the wind picked up. At first, it was a faint murmur, but soon it grew into a roar. Sand blasted against the windshield, and I could barely see the road. Panic bubbled in my chest as the storm swallowed the world around me. I couldn't keep driving. I'd crash if I kept going. Through the swirling sand, a structure materialized in the distance. An old hotel, standing defiantly against the elements, its sign creaking in the storm. Desert Rose Inn. I pulled into the gravel lot, the car crunching to a halt. The building was as dilapidated as it looked from afar, with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. But it was shelter. I grabbed my camera bag and hurried inside, fighting against the gusts. The lobby was dimly lit, smelling of dust and age. At the desk sat a receptionist, an elderly woman with skin like parchment and eyes that seemed to see too much. Her voice was raspy, almost a whisper. "Welcome," she said, her gaze piercing. "You'll be our only guest tonight." I wanted to question her. Why was this place still running? But exhaustion and relief silenced me. I signed the guest book, noting the faded name scrawled in shaky handwriting. She handed me a key, her fingers cold and bony as they brushed mine. "Room 203, she said, her tone heavy with something I couldn't place. "Don't wander after dark." Her words sent a chill through me, but I shook it off. Superstitious locals were nothing new in my line of work. The room was just as decrepit as the rest of the hotel, but it had a bed and a working lock. That was enough. The storm howled outside, rattling the windows, but exhaustion soon overtook me. I drifted into an uneasy sleep. I woke, or thought I did. My body was paralyzed, pinned to the bed as if by invisible hands. The room was bathed in an eerie, dim light, and shadows danced on the walls. Figures, tall, gaunt, and unrecognizable as human, stood at the edges of my vision. They whispered in languages I couldn't understand, their words like nails scraping against glass. Panic surged, but I couldn't scream, couldn't move. One figure leaned closer, its face shrouded in darkness. Just as it reached for me, I gasped awake, my body drenched in sweat. The room was silent, the shadows gone. I tried to convince myself it was just sleep paralysis, a trick of the mind, but the fear lingered, a cold weight in my chest. Then came the knocking. It was faint at first, almost hesitant, but it grew louder and more insistent. I crept to the door, my heart pounding, and peered through the peephole. A man stood there, disheveled and desperate, his face illuminated by the flickering hallway light. "Please," he begged. "I'm stranded. Do you have any food?" My instinct screamed to ignore him, to lock the door and stay silent. But something about his voice, a raw, pleading note, compelled me. I grabbed a granola bar from my bag and cracked the door open just enough to pass it through. His hand shot out, trembling as he snatched it. "Thank you," he murmured. Then he was gone. I bolted the door and pressed my back against it, trying to calm my racing heart. Sleep was impossible after that. I sat in bed, clutching my camera like a talisman as the hours crawled by. At some point, I must have drifted off. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the grimy curtains. But something was wrong. My camera lay on the floor, shattered, the lens cracked, its pieces scattered like jagged teeth. My breath hitched as I scanned the room. It was empty, yet the air felt thick, oppressive. I grabbed my bag and fled, not even stopping to check out. The hotel was gone. I stood on the highway, my car parked where I'd left it. No building, no gravel lot, just endless sand. My hand shook as I climbed into the car. The engine's hum grounded me in the present. Later, I researched the area, desperate for answers. What I found chilled me to my core. The desert rose and had once stood there, decades ago, before it was abandoned and demolished. Locals said it was built on sacred land, cursed by those who had claimed it. Travelers who took shelter there were said to experience shared dreams, vivid and horrific. I hadn't believed in curses or spirits before. But now, every time I close my eyes, I see shadowy figures, hear their whispers, and sometimes in the dead of night, I wake to the sound of knocking. I always loved the idea of getting lost somewhere quiet. As a travel writer, it wasn't unusual for me to seek out places off the beaten path. So when I stumbled across the Fernwood Online, a quaint bed and breakfast nestled deep in the woods, I didn't hesitate to book a stay. The reviews boasted cozy rooms, home-cooked meals, and unparalleled solitude, which sounded perfect. I didn't know that solitude could so easily twist into something sinister. I arrived on Thanksgiving afternoon. The chill in the air was sharp but inviting, and the autumn leaves clinging stubbornly to the trees glowed in fiery hues. The innkeeper, Mrs. Calloway, greeted me with a warm smile, her hands covered in flour from preparing the evening's feast. "Welcome, Emily," she said, usher me inside. "You'll feel right at home here." The interior of the inn was just as charming as I'd imagined. Vintage decor, creaky wooden floors, and the faint scent of cinnamon drifting through the air. After checking into my room, a cozy space with a canopy bed and a window overlooking the woods, I ventured downstairs for Thanksgiving dinner. Mrs. Calloway had invited all the guests to attend. There were only a handful of us, a friendly older couple, a young woman reading a thick novel, and a man named Derek. Derek sat alone, his posture stiff, his dark eyes glancing up occasionally from his plate. I felt his gaze linger on me more than once, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was just shy. After dinner, I retreated to the living room, where a roaring fire crackled in the stone hearth. I settled into a plush armchair, draping my favorite red scarf over the back. It was a gift from my sister, and I never traveled without it. As I sipped a cup of tea and began jotting notes for an article, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. The message read, "I see you love the red scarf." My heart skipped a beat. I glanced around the room. The older couple had already gone to bed, and the young woman was still absorbed in her book. Derek was nowhere in sight. I stared at the message, my fingers trembling. Was this a prank? Who could have sent it? I turned my phone off, telling myself it was probably nothing, but I couldn't shake the unease. That night, I lay in bed, tossing and turning, my mind racing with paranoid thoughts. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, but it wasn't long before I woke, or thought I woke. My body was frozen. My eyes darted around the room, but I couldn't move. The air was thick, oppressive, and a faint whisper echoed in my ears. "Emily, Emily." It was coming from the corner of the room, where the shadows seemed darker than they should have been. I tried to scream, to thrash, but I was trapped. The weight on my chest felt like invisible hands pressing down on me. Finally, with a gasping breath, I snapped out of it. I sat up, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. Was it just a nightmare? About of sleep paralysis? But then I saw the muddy boot prints. They started near the window and led to the foot of my bed before vanishing. My stomach churned. I rushed to the window and found it slightly ajar. A cold breeze seeped in, chilling me to the bone. Someone had been in my room. At dawn, I confronted Mrs. Calloway, who looked genuinely horrified. "I don't understand," she said. "Derek left late last night. He told me he had an emergency back home." My anxiety spiked. If Derek had left, who was in my room? I packed my bags in record time, determined to leave immediately. But when I got in my car, the engine refused to turn over. Frustrated, I popped the hood, only to find a battery missing. That's when I noticed a note tucked under the windshield wiper. "See you soon." My blood ran cold. I glanced around the empty parking lot, my eyes scanning the tree line for any movement. My breath quickened as I grabbed my phone and dialed for help. It felt like an eternity before the tow truck arrived. The driver, a burly man with a kind face, didn't ask too many questions. I didn't offer many answers either. As we pulled away from the inn, I looked back one last time. The curtains in my room were drawn, but I could have sworn I saw a shadow shift behind them. I never stayed in a bed and breakfast again after that. In fact, I barely travel alone anymore. The once inviting isolation now felt suffocating, dangerous. I never figured out who sent the message, or who had been in my room that night, but I can still hear the whispers. And I never wear that red scarf.